Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. Tonight, instead of our usual debates, we'd like to give you a glimpse of the year that was by showcasing the best and the hottest topics we've tackled so far. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. Republic Act 10175, or the Cybercrime Prevention Act, caused an alarm to a lot of netizens as it posed a threat through its controversial online libel clause. The long-standing proposal of environmentalists to ban the use of plastic bags in mitigating the effects of calamities also became an intense issue here in the program. We also look into the merit of the proposed increase in Social Security System or SSS contribution from its members. Now, last year we paid attention to both policies and policymakers that affect our lives and the nation as a whole.
Will banning plastic production lead to serious economic repercussions? Will it cause loss of jobs?
Well, for us, the jobs lost for if you ban plastic bags, it's not really a dent in the plastic industry, because the plastic industry, the big companies, they produce plastic bags among the other plastic products. So these people, they're not really that much, but we have an alternative to that. If you have these reusable bags made of indigenous materials, then you can have weaving, making of bags in the countryside. And with that, you produce more jobs.
Shopping bag is done by separate companies, and that's not combined with any other plastic product. And in the plastic industry, for the shopping bag, there's probably around 175,000 employees. Of those, 20% already lost their job. PCCI has a study on this. 20% has lost their job already. And those people who lose their job didn't go to the weaving of bayong and everything. They had to find other job. And if they're old and weary, who will take?
What happened to them?
They just have to retire early.
But I think it's also part of the government
Uh-huh.
to really encourage and make this like the cottage industries.
The cottage industry,
it should
yes,
come from the
we
government.
we support the making of bayong, the making of using water lily, but are they sustainable?
Yes.
Like at this time in our nation where Tacloban summer, can they get bayong, millions of bayong going to Tacloban to put the relief goods? It's very hard.
Kasi nga, hindi inaano pa ng government. No? Government
But
should
can you
step in
produce?
and really make bayong production, mass production.
And then, of course, again, where will the leaves of the trees go?
No,
Of our coconut trees?
that's
Are
not.
they enough?
No, it's not the leaves of the coconut. These are giant pandans, buri, abaka,
There's corn husk. I remember.
and they grow in the countryside. And because
they
now
enough?
they have more bayong productions, they already plant the pandans, because it's not enough to just get them as they grow. So it's sustainable. Kasi tumutubo lang yan eh. You can plant, you can use them. Pag
Then again,
nabulok,
We are not helping environment if we start getting the leaves, because the leaves are needed for sunlight, for the growth of the trees.
This is a plant that has to be used. Like yung banig natin sa probinsya, kinukuha din yan sa buri tree. Hindi mo naman pinapatay yung tree eh. You just
Pero
get the
kailangan
leaves.
na ng puno ang leaves to get their energy.
So you're saying baka maubos.
Baka maubos din yung mga puno
Maubos
natin.
It grows again.
It grows again, Peter.
It grows again. Para sa mga ating kababayan, talaga namang nakikita natin kung gaano ang nadudulot ng plastic bags. Plastic bags lang ang ating gustong iban, hindi yung buong plastic. Ngayon, dun sa pagbibigay natin ng relief ngayon doon sa mga nasalanta, talagang plastic bags ang available eh. So bakit hindi talagang gamitin? Nananawagan lang kami na yung mga plastic bags na ginamit ninyo, pwede bang huwag ninyong itapon sa dagat, sa ilog o kung saan man at ipunin? At sabi nga ni Peter, na-recycle. Pero sana nga, kung ang gobyerno natin ay tutulong sa ating mga kababayan na talagang gawing main industry ang bayong production, bakit hindi magkakaroon ng milyon-milyong bayong para dyan ilagay ang ating aid? At magagamit pa nila yan. At pag yun ay nasira, yan ay biodegradable, nabubulok siya.
Ang plastic bag ginawa dahil para sa environment. Hindi siya ginawa dahil gusto natin siyang itapon. Dapat pagtulong-tulungan natin paano natin ito malilikom at may recycle para makapag-conserve tayo ng ating resources. Sa pagkaganong paraan, marami tayong matutulungan. Ang ating environment at syempre ang mga taong susunod sa atin. So kailangan talaga matuto natin kunin to at i-recycle. There is recycling. In the 1980s, United Nations also said Philippines has the highest recycling of plastic. So dapat talaga kailangan ituro natin ng tama sa mga tao na meron talagang recycling.
I'd like to talk about our courts and
Yes.
are the ones who will be implementing the cybercrime law. Are we capable? Are the authorities ready and capable to implement this in a way that it does not affect people's rights?
There are people in the NBI, in the PNP, and in the Justice Cybercrime section that are quite capable and up to date and quite tech savvy. But you cannot say that of the whole law enforcement agency. And that's why, as a matter of precaution, we said we are going to provide 50 million per agency to do this capability building.
The police and the other authorities have their special units eh. Apparently, sila lang yung na-consult dito sa law na to eh. The netizens weren't.
You know, we started this law, yung public hearing, public consultation, in May of 2012, and we didn't go to the plenary until January. And in between May and January was intensive public hearings. We created even a technical working group. And I'm sure if you look back at the print and broadcast media, they've been publicizing this public hearing.
There would have been ways for citizens to help the good senator and the other authors remedy the questionable provisions of the law. But even the media was surprised when the president signed it September 12 last year. It was a complete shock.
The
It was a complete shock.
The National Press Club was there all the time.
I think we cannot say that the public was ready at that time.
There are no increases in salaries of employees. Rather, what we're doing is 0.6% increase, which is really very small increase. Napakaliit po na increase na paghahatian ng employer at employee. Kung inyo pong natatandaan, for the past several years, our rate of contribution has been pegged at 8.4%. And only in 2003, then afterwards, and 2007, when 1 percentage point increases each time were implemented. And ito naman ay employer ang bumalikat dito. So ngayon, ang hinihingi natin, 0.6% from 10.4, gagawin siyang 11%. In real terms, kung sa 15,000 na salary credit, which is the maximum right now, ibig sabihin lang yan, 45 pesos sa share ng employee at share ng employer. At kung tingin natin dito ay savings, hindi ito dapat parang hindi nila isipin na gastos kasi savings sila to eh.
You have two ways of looking at it, Rod. It could be savings sa tingin ni Ms. Bugante, but it could also be taxes sa tingin ng employers and even the employees kasi you're paying a lot more for the benefits supposedly that will accrue to you. Pero nabanggit nga ng SSS na ang reform is structural. Sa amin yung structural reform should not only focus on the rate of contribution, but also should focus on one, ano ang structural adjustments ang gagawin mo para ma-ensure mo na ma-collect ang unremitted premiums. Alam niyo, Rod, it's a heinous crime. Yung kakarampot na sweldo ng manggagawa, babawasan mo pa para kunyari i-remit sa SSS. Ngayon yung manggagawa, pag pumunta siya sa ospital, hindi, delinquente pala siya, so hindi siya maka-avail. Hindi lang siya nabawasan ng sweldo, hindi pa niremit sa SSS. And of course, mangungutang siya ngayon ng 5-6 para pagbayaran yung hospital. So grabe ang epekto sa manggagawa.
Isang factor yan, yung efficiency in the collection. At meron naman tayong units na nasa organizational naman namin, structure na merong mga units that are doing that kind of task. Meron tayong isang hindi lang isa, kundi bawat cluster namin, meron kaming legal services that do nothing but file charges against erring employers, those who do not remit. But of course, it has to go through the process. Hindi naman yung karaka-raka na pagka na-assess mo yung isang company na, hindi ka pala nag-remit, ganito, bayaran mo. So, you have to go through the process.
All right, we'll take a short break. Meanwhile, join us online. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/SolarOpposingViews. Follow us also on Twitter at opposing_views. Use the hashtag BestOfOV. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching the Best of Opposing Views. Together with the heated discussions about the Reproductive Health or RH bill, we examined the issue of abortion. We also took into account the possibility of legalizing same-sex marriage here in the Philippines. We also opened our doors to our other perennial issues such as reopening the Bataan nuclear power plant, the state subsidy to informal settlers, and the bus segregation schemes of the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority or MMDA. These are the social issues in 2013 that caught our attention, some even disturb us, and shake the foundation of our beliefs. We have antiquated laws, and our laws penalizing abortion in the revised penal code came from Spain, and now Spain has already legalized abortion. What say you?
Ang sasabihin nyo kung yung mga ibang tao ay magkamali na rin tayo. Ang reasoning ni Mr. Joko, 600,000 women suffer, so we must now allow more to suffer. But hindi 600,000 lamang ang victim ng abortion. Billions of babies have already been killed. If that is the argument, papayag na pala tayo. Hindi. Pag mali.
I stand for the women. I understand the law of the land that is not going to be legalized at this point.
But if you had a choice, though, you'd like it legalized? Let's say it's possible. Let's say it's possible.
If it's possible,
you'd like it legalized?
Yes, I would like it legalized. But I do recognize that it cannot be legalized at this point. But also, we have to understand what make women commit abortion. For instance, look at the profile of the women who are having abortions. 87 of them are Catholics. 87%, of them are Catholics. On the average, they have more than 3 kids. More than 90% of them are poor. And if you look at the issue deeply, you would also recognize and see that this is also a social justice issue. This is an issue that affects more poor women than those who are unpoor.
I will have to be very, very fundamental in our reasoning. Abortion is bad because it kills a life.
You're saying that if we legalize it, then the government set up this legalized
What
abortion
I'm saying
clinics. It's
is
monitored. It's
two things, Rod.
Overseen
One,
by the government.
Before the abortion, there are a lot of things that women need. One of these is family planning. We have to address that. It's a very critical thing that family planning, needs for family planning is addressed. One, the unmet need for family planning of women who are poor is much higher than those who are not poor. Secondly, after abortion, it's also in the law. It's in the Magna Carta of women that there should be prevention of abortion and curing of post-abortion cases. Post-abortion cases. These are in the law.
Yeah. Yes.
Tama yung sinasabi ni Beth. Tulungan natin ang kababaihan before the situation for abortion.
Yes.
And post-abortion, yung nagkamali, huwag natin kondenahin. Turuan natin, akayin natin.
Let's talk.
Dahil we cannot solve the problem by allowing killing. I'll give an example, Rod. I carry here, this is an example of an 11-week-old baby. Ito mo, nananahimik sa sinapupunan ng ina. Yan, pag pinayagan natin ng abortion, gagamitan yan ng ganito. Ayan, susungkitin yan sa loob ng sinapupunan. Walang kinalaman ng baby niyan. He is inside the womb, supposedly the safest place in the world for a baby. Yan ay papatayin sa loob ng sinapupunan. Yan ay pipira-pirasuhin, itong forceps na ganito. At darating yung point na they will even crack the skull of the baby inside the womb and flush it out and suction it out. And that's the kind of discussion that we're having. Allowing this kind of
whether
thing,
we allow it.
We should never allow it.
At the same time, we are talking also of the lives of women. This is a book that contains women's stories, real women's stories of those who have undergone abortion, who almost died, and who had suffered in terms of the choices they had
because
to
they were
make.
not allowed to have an
Because
abortion?
they didn't have any other options.
Beth, we should help these
My
women.
point is that we should not pit the mother against
child.
the unborn. Because the mother is the one who carries
Still
the
alive.
unborn. The mother is the one that's
kaya
needing
patayin na
attention
yung walang kamalay-malay.
and needs.
Patayin
That's
na yung
not the
sanggol
point, Rep.
dahil
That's
sa
not the
pagkakamali
point.
ng ina.
The
Alright.
point is
What's the point?
address the problems
point
of
is you
women,
want to legalize
and less
killing
women
an
will have
innocent
abortions.
life.
Sorry.
Family planning alone will actually reduce abortion by 500,000.
Alright, let's talk,
Again, that's very valid.
let's,
Why aren't we doing that?
Okay, let's... Is homosexuality a sin? Dr.
Sin.
Benny?
Well, you know, it's, if I will play politics, I'll accommodate, I'll compromise. Being a politician, I'll just say, all right, let's accept it. But when it comes to the Bible, definitely it is sin.
The whole human race has different religions. And the Bible in itself only comprises, we'll say majority, but it doesn't speak for the whole of humanity. And for us, the humanity, and I speak in general, spirituality, same-sex marriage is ultimately about love. And it's something human, it's something personal. And I
Rika,
think
have you read the
there's
Quran?
nothing- No, I
The
haven't.
Quran
read
is
the-
against same-sex marriage.
Yes, but... if
All
you-
right, now we just talk about the Bible. We talk about almost all religions that is based on morality.
Yes, all
See?
about the tribes
You
in the
believe
north.
biblical morality? You're a religious man? I'm telling you. I mean, who are you? You're a man. Am I right? God made you a man.
Excuse me,
And
sir.
therefore be a man.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'm
See?
sorry, sir. You have no right to dictate what I want
No,
to
I'm
have
not
in
saying
life.
I-
You don't even know
I
me.
am
You
not
don't
saying
even
I have
know.
any right.
You don't
Alright.
know me. How,
I'm not saying I have
how
any
sure
right.
are you that I am a man?
I also
How-
have the
okay.
right to tell you that.
All right.
Tell me,
So let's
how
see.
sure are you that I am a man?
All right.
Did you
This is going to be
see
a
my
very
birth
interesting
certificate?
show right
I'm telling
here.
Are you from NSO? You're not from
I'm not
NSO.
telling-
Do you think that you feel very strongly that the society or the state should recognize marriages?
Of course.
Why do you need to get married?
It's a state obligation. This is not just about something religious or something that you believe in. But I think as a state and as people who are productive, we're paying taxes, we're supporting the state. The state has the obligation to support our existence as the citizen of the country. For example, for a lot of people who cohabit, and these are same-sex individuals, a lot of the benefits that the typical heterosexual couple enjoy, like dependence,
Tax exemptions,
like tax exemptions, like, for example, this is the person who you can designate to speak for you in case of medical emergency or in case of insurance claims, stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, these are people that same-sex individuals who cohabit don't enjoy, and
Because they're not
because they're not like legally recognized by the state. And you know, if you look at it in the basis of having a living which you deserve as a Filipino, everybody should enjoy the same right. And for me, that is the bottom line of it. It's the state obligation to provide a good quality living for all its citizens, because us, as people,
Because you're
LGBT
human,
people, we, you know, oblige ourselves to how can we even contribute to the state. Everything that the state wants us to do, we do.
No,
but the state should provide something for us as well, just
Dr.
like
Benny,
everybody else.
basically what Rika's saying is that they're feeling second-class citizens. They pay their taxes. Why should their relationship be treated any different from
Well, whether you are
male and female?
whether you're married or not, you have to pay taxes.
Right.
Yes.
All right, and whether you're married or not, there are some rights that we ought to respect. You have your rights. I have my rights. We've
Yes.
got to respect each other's rights.
Yes.
Okay? Now,
Now, do you think
what I'm saying is, all right, what I'm saying is, now there's always a basis of law when it comes to the kind of life we live. All right? Now, I'm not, you know, I'm not referring to, well, you need to have tax exemption, you need to have this and that, so therefore you've got to be married together as man and man. What I'm saying is, where is that on the basis of right and wrong? Where's that? I mean, do we believe that there's black and there's white? Do we believe that there is right and there is wrong? Do we believe that there is true and there's false? Now, if we're living in a society in which let's take away all rightness and wrongness, just have free love. I mean, have all the freedom and be like this. We're going back to Genesis chapter 6, where their law is their conscience.
All right.
All right? That's what we are. And
All
that
right.
is the kind of life we're living in now.
May,
All right.
may I
Sure.
speak for that?
Sure, Rika. Yes.
And that is not actually what's happening in the global arena. 18 countries right now, including United States and Spain, who has brought us, the Roman Catholic, for the record, is moving forward. They legalize same-sex marriage, they legalize divorce, they legalize gender recognition, and they are moving forward. This is the future of the world.
Not
We
every
are not
state
coming
in the
back.
U.S. Not every state in the U.S.
Of course, but we are moving
I
there.
think you've got to study it. Now, look, do we mean that if they're moving forward, then if we're not doing that, we're moving backward? I don't think so.
All right.
Come on.
Now, let's talk about radiation. Okay, let's move on from waste management. Radiation, generally, most people are, obviously with me, I might consider a nuclear plant powering my electricity so that my electricity will get lower. I might consider it, but if it was built in my neighborhood or maybe like 5 kilometers away from me, I might have an issue with that. Radiation. Mark, what are the radiation factors? when it
Radiation
comes to-
is all around us.
Yeah.
It's in the soil at 2 parts per million average all over the earth. It's in the ocean at 3 parts per billion. If you took all the uranium in the ocean, it would be 4.5 trillion tons of uranium
Right.
all around us emitting radiation. If you go in an airplane, you get exposed to cosmic rays, which is higher than 10 chest X-rays. So you are exposed to uranium. If you're worried about uranium, you should be worried about coal. According to Professor Stephen Chu, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, appointed by Obama as a DOE secretary for the U.S. during his first term, what does he say? He says, a typical plant worried about radioactivity, coal is your bogeyman. A typical coal plant emits 100 times more radiation than a nuclear plant, given the fly ash emissions of radioactive particles.
Doc, your thoughts on this?
And the problem there is not just the plant emitting radiation, but the risk together with the site. That's why I keep on pointing out that the site where the BNPP is a very
Your position
dangerous
is mainly
site.
just for the BNPP. But how about nuclear power plants in general?
And in the Philippines, we have volcanoes, we have
We have a volcano for every square kilometer.
and we also have fault lines around and key biodiversity areas around. And therefore, the risk of emission upon failure is a big problem,
What
just
people-
like what happened in Fukushima.
What people should realize is that in Fukushima, not a single person was injured
And
or
it's
died
keeping
because
on-
of radiation.
And it's keeping
And there
releasing
were-
radiation
there
until
were-
now, and they haven't even solved the problem even until now,
Which-
several years afterwards.
which is being overblown
Yeah.
and put in the wrong context by people who don't understand or are interpreting the data very wrongly, like Professor Tapang.
So do you think that parang they're putting in just a fear factor
For
there?
example, they say 300 tons of radioactive water was released into the ocean, but they never quantify the amount of radioactive substance in the 300 tons of water, which are milligrams. So it's
In the whole scheme of things, it doesn't really...
it doesn't matter because in
But
the
there
ocean,
are
because in the
mechanisms-
ocean there are
There are
4.5
mechanisms that
trillion
actually
tons of
would
uranium.
concentrate this on marine mammals, marine fishes that
It
you
would have
could
an
eat.
impact.
And therefore, the
There-
long-term problem of radioactive release is what makes the problem of finding the correct site, finding the correct design for nuclear power. And for example, the BNPP fails for this one.
Are you for or against subsidy? Government subsidy? to
I
spoilers?
am against all forms of subsidy.
All forms of subsidy. Now,
You want to know why?
Yes, please.
Well, let's start with tariff walls. You know, back in my time, you folks are young. You raise the tariff wall up so high to protect local industries. What did local industry do? They sit idly by because they are protected by a tariff wall.
No, that's not correct. Our position is a particular form of subsidy ought to be given informal settlers, but not the monetary kind.
Why should the piece of land that I acquired with blood and sweat be occupied by squatters I cannot drive out?
Right.
I mean, I'm not a violent man.
Yeah. But you agree with the
If
demolition?
I lose,
Yeah.
if I lose my sanity, I might be bound to shoot
No, all
them.
right. Congressman, your thoughts? Mr. Jake said demolition is the way to go.
Well, I think there needs to be a distinction between the government lands being occupied by the informal settlers and private lands.
Private lands, yeah.
Yes, correct.
I think in the Lina law, the private owners can really subject his or her areas to demolition proceedings because that's his property.
That's a good point.
But I think most of the demolitions occurring around the Metro Manila area are mostly government lands.
Right.
And I think, which is why I think many of the urban poor settlers are really protesting because they want to remove them from government lands, but government doesn't really want to provide relocation for them. And under the Lina law, it is the state obligation.
Do you think that this is a solution to decongest Metro Manila?
MMDA has identified 3 areas for this interim transport terminals. One in Cavite, in the Coastal Mall, one in Trinoma in Quezon City, one in Muntinlupa. However, if you look at Metro Manila per se, there are 7 entry and exit points. How can we reconcile yung 7 points ng entry at saka exit into 3 chosen terminals? Walang connection whatsoever. At the same time, assuming you say na integrated terminal yan, there should be another mode of service that will connect the provincial commuters from the chosen terminal to be able for the passengers to go to their respective destinations.
And ngayon, wala pa yon.
Wala yun eh.
Sir Alex, mag-rebut lang po ako ha. Urbanization is something that we are embracing sa MMDA. Gusto natin yan. Napaka-economical to manage 636 square kilometers of high economic contribution. 33% magiging 55% pa yung pagpalalakihin natin. Ang problema po talaga natin pag-manage ng ating transport systems. Public transport ang magiging solusyon talaga ng traffic natin. Kailangan lang talaga nating ayusin. Para ang lahat ng mga mananakay ng pribadong sasakyan will no longer even opt to buy another car. Pag-aayusin natin yung sistema.
You have identified the 3 chosen points ng terminals, and yet you have not talked to the stakeholders. Yung commuters, hindi nila alam. You know, ako, I tried to use the Southwest Terminal. I could just imagine yung mga tao, na naglalakad ng napakalayo in the rain, in the sun. Mahawa naman kayo eh.
We just had to do it as a temporary measure, but with the end in mind that by 2015, the destination design and the destination locations will already be implemented and headed by the DOTC, but still relegated to the 2 other agencies. What Chairman Tolentino did is, sige, let's start on it already right now. Let's perfect the process. Let's now understand the dynamics of this, address the concerns of commuters, and if they're complaining, let's better face it, and therefore let's solve it.
Right.
So there is no intention to disregard the welfare of our passengers.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, more pressing issues we've dealt with last year. You're watching Opposing Views. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the best of Opposing Views on Solar News Channel. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. In line with the anniversary celebration of Solar Current Affairs, Opposing Views went to the University of the Philippines to weigh the issue of having ethics classes in schools to beat corruption as proposed by one legislator. Should schools include ethics classes in their class curriculum to address the lack of moral foundation and also to address corruption? Now, I'll throw this question to Ateneo first. Now, is the lack of moral foundation, you think the lack of moral foundation the cause of corruption in the country, or do you think that perhaps it's sometimes just a lack of information?
Honestly, I think it's both, and it's not bad that you try to target one root of the problem. If you look at the lack of moral foundation, of the country right now, it's that people think that it's okay to do these things as long as they still deliver the social goods that they promised as government officials. And the problem with ethics classes, and the good thing about ethics classes is it makes people more knowledgeable that these things that government officials are doing are still not justifiable even if they've done certain goods in society. Like, for example, how certain congressmen should not be exempt from taxes just because they're, famous people who have given national pride or something. So it's more of a good thing because it allows individuals to realize that nobody's special when it comes to what ethical standards you're supposed to abide by, and that's something that we should value.
All right. UP, do you think it's the lack of moral foundation that's the cause of corruption in the country?
I don't think so. If you look at how the business sphere works, people know you should pay taxes. Everyone agrees that paying taxes is a good thing. But you have a lot of businesses that evade taxes to stay competitive. That's why other businesses also try to evade taxes so you can bring down prices and compete. Now, if you start paying taxes, you guys will die out the competition. And so it's a matter of framing that it's the environment that allows corruption to happen.
It's not the fact that they're morally
It's not because they're morally
bad,
but because it's the only way to
it's
survive.
the situation, yeah.
Or for example, you have people who jaywalk. These guys know jaywalking is bad, but it's the fastest way to get there. And the system allows it because you don't have MMDAs just watching around. If you have MMDAs in every corner, then people will behave. There's this theory called the broken window theory. It was applied in New York City. This theory states that if you have more broken windows, people are more likely to do graffiti and to do all these harmful things. Now, if the environment becomes really pleasant, people are less likely to do corruption. People are less likely to do bad things. But because the environment is just so bad, then people do these things because they just can do it.
Now, there's a concept called in law, no? Mala in se and mala in prohibitum, di ba? It's basically an evil in and by itself and evil because the law says so. Like, for example, jaywalking in and by itself, it's in and by itself. It's not immoral, right? So I guess, so I'll throw the question to you guys. Again, I'll throw this to Ateneo. Going to that scenario wherein there are certain things, I guess certain situations where it's not so defined, di ba? And here's the challenge for having a mandatory ethics class is sometimes certain situations can't be defined. Of course, those that are morally wrong, as we know, killing and stealing, that's wrong in itself. But for example, a situation wherein a contractor is hired by the government through a proper bidding, and the contractor builds the road, and then the contractor was so happy with the Department of Highways, and he treats the Secretary of Department of Highways for a nice, sumptuous dinner in Singapore. So, is there anything? Now, some people might question that as corruption, and some people might say, well, it was just a dinner. So, my question to you is, in situations like that, do you think standard classes in ethics will be able to address those situations?
If you expect that these ethics classes can give like a straight answer to every single situation about what a person can do, then I think we're challenging the government too much. What these, at best, and we have to be reasonable, what these ethics classes can do is that it can tell people what the relevant considerations are when it comes to a certain context. So when we're talking about that situation wherein a government official, for instance, treats his fellow friends or politicians to a sumptuous dinner in Singapore, what the ethics classes will tell you is, what are the full implications of that, especially considering the nuance of that politician. Say, for example, that he uses taxpayers' money to fund that, that dinner. Is that still moral? Is that still irrelevant? And in so doing, we're still giving the autonomy, or we're still giving the choice for the student himself to come up with a decision. But what these classes do in effect is that it gives more information for that person to make an informed choice.
All right. Now, UP, the fact that your position is that we don't need a mandatory ethics class. Now, the fact that that's your position, don't you think that it gives it more leeway, gives that, for example, that politician or that government official more leeway because there's no ethics class. There's no, the definition of black and white, or whether what to do or what not to do in specific situations is not taught. Diba? Of course, you're basing it now on ethics classes as you would say, in your homeroom classes. Do you think that's sufficient to be able to address situations like that where they're kind of gray area? Yeah.
Basing on how Bass explained the ethics classes, he just said these people will still decide, but they have more information. Which means in the end, it's still pretty much the same situation. that these guys are left to decide on their own. It's just that they're deciding with different frame of mind. So it's sort of inconclusive as well. Like I thought ethics classes would be teaching us, they would teach that corruption is bad or stealing is bad. Universal values according to them. But when it comes to these higher level ethics, then it does exist in individual courses, which doesn't change anything.
Naya?
The thing about the bill is it's going to require everyone to study it. It's going to be a separate class, like something like PI 100 or that Rizal class. So the thing is, it's absolutely not going to be as necessary for all people. It's the same point I was able to raise a while ago, that if you're talking about just the considerations of what are the repercussions of treating someone to dinner, these people, probably your politicians would need to do it. But for your institutions, for example, to spend one class for it, one classroom, one teacher for it, I think it's absolutely unnecessary. Probably we can require civil servants to have seminars about these things, and we can teach them about these things. But students in the universities...
But you don't need to appropriate money to
Yes.
have that class.
I don't think grade 3 students have to know it.
to teach those situations. All right. Now, I'll throw this question. Where does corruption, in your minds, where does it begin? Does it begin in the home? Does it begin in schools, in families? Where does it begin, or does it begin after school?
It varies. Like to an individual, they might have grown up like belonging to a family who belongs to a political dynasty, and corruption has been inherent in their family for generations.
That's right.
For
So to them,
yeah.
inheriting a mayoralty position or governor's position is not ethically wrong, right?
Or to someone else, it could have been
Right.
that they were pushed to the wall in a situation and they were forced to commit a crime, like for example, stealing from the government in order to like solve the problem wherein government officials have low salaries,
Yes.
etc., etc. So it really varies. But what ethics classes would do is they would help you navigate in those times where there are moral gray areas, especially in a culture like in the Philippines, because I refuse to believe that systems allow for corruption to happen. There is no law that will ever tell you that corruption is something that's okay, but rather it's the people who are practicing the law and who are in the legislative right now, who are practicing the law in such a way wherein they skirt through the nitty-gritty details of the law in order to make sure that things are permissible. So if we're trying to tackle the political culture of the Philippines, which is right now in that area wherein people think that corruption can be permissible at times, then the only way that you can target it is proactively by making sure that children at a young age will be learning this, and especially children who also belong to political families. Like for example, if they're taught that what their parents might be doing in the government because their parents are under investigation are wrong, and they talk about it in the dinner table, it becomes something much more personal as opposed to the detached perception that government officials have because they aren't really affected by the crimes that they're committing. So if children will point out, hey dad, I heard about this, and I know that there's a case about you, don't you think that what you're doing is wrong? Then it might change something in the family dynamics of these political families.
All right. Bas, did you want to weigh in, or?
I think the solution to corruption is actually twofold. One dimension which they talked about is correct. We obviously need to fix systems, and obviously we're not against that. So that's something that we share. We need to make sure that we fix our tax system so that tax evasion doesn't happen. But on the ground, we also need to make sure that the students who will be part of the system and will work for the system will use it responsibly and not to try to find any other loophole or error within that system. Because there will always be, even like, there will never be a situation where we can fix and consolidate the system clearly enough so that people don't take advantage of it.
All right.
And it really does start in schools, because, in high school, that's where like politicians make friends, and when they get into office, these are the friends who will be assigned into executive positions through patronage. So it's a twofold thing. We also need to reinforce mindsets on the ground.
All right. Now, UP, again, throwing the question, where do you think the corruption begins? Do you think it begins at home, in schools, or do you think it begins after school? And because obviously it's a relevant question because do we need to put an ethics class in school? But if ethics starts at home, so should we really need to put it in the school curriculum?
I think corruption is more likely to start at home. In school, we rarely have teachers who would say corruption is good and they would teach corrupt tactics. It's usually the parents who will say, okay, this is how you cheat your way through school so you get higher grades and I can brag to you about my friends, right? Or this is how you do business, or this is how you get your way ahead. It's usually the parents who may have maligned intents in trying to forward their kid But even then, we still see that kids are able to combat this form of corrupt ideals, or maybe people with better families are able to fight that. And we're able to rally against the pork barrel, we're able to rally against corrupt officials without the ethics class that you're trying to propose in this debate. So it's really possible to fight it.
After the break, our best episodes covering corruption, politics, and accountability of government officials. Stay tuned. You're watching Opposing Views. Welcome back. This is the best of Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. The year 2013 was a test of resiliency to many Filipinos, but this was also a test of transparency and accountability to our government officials. Last year, we dug deeper into the issues of the Priority Development Assistance Fund, or PDAF, and the Aquino policy called the Disbursement Acceleration Program, or DAP. Can I ask you, is the pork barrel the root cause of this large-scale corruption? Yes or no?
We've long known that pork barrel has and corruption go hand in hand. But what's different now is the magnitude and scope of this large network of corruption centered on the pork barrel that we're seeing with this, the Janet Lim Napoles network of fake NGOs. And originally, only 28 legislators were named as being involved, but subsequently, more and more
people are involved.
now it's up to 90 plus legislators who have been named as in one way or other channeling their funds to these bogus NGOs funding ghost projects.
All right. Now, Congressman Albano, your thoughts on that?
What he said is, it's not the fault of the pork. It's the fault of the one using the pork. It's how you use the pork.
All right.
Hindi ba yung sinasabi niya eh? Siya yung gumagamit ng pork ang may kasalanan, pero yung pork mismo, ano naman kasalanan ng pork?
Parang money is the root of all evil, di ba?
Yeah, exactly. Ano kasalanan ng money? Kung sino yung gumagamit ng money, yun na.
But can I ask you though,
may sinabi si Secretary Rojas about the BOC, di ba? Sabi niya, hindi naman yung BOC yung sistema yung may kasalanan, di ba? Yung mga tao na nagmamando sa BOC, ang corrupt. Hindi naman yung corrupt yung institution eh, di ba? Ang corrupt yung taong gumagamit nung may mechanisms naman kung paano parusahan yung mga taong yun. There's the ombudsman, may election na susunod. Kung mali-mali yung gamit mo ng pork, malalaman naman ng tao mo yan eh. Malalaman ng taong bayan yan. Hindi kayo boboto sa susunod na election yan. Saka may plunder yan, may kulong yan. That's why may safeguards na ginagamit, may mechanisms yan.
Now, before Congressman Albano, if you don't mind me asking, before 1990, there was no pork barrel. And it was all fine, right? Or it wasn't fine?
Hindi, no. Before 1990, there was this NALGO-BALGO funds. National Aid for Local Government Units and Barangay Aid for Local Government Units. Kasi wala legislature nung araw eh. So there was no institution to allocate these resources. It was the executive who allocates these resources. So the pork was in the hands of the executive department. Para nung kay Marcos noon, walang legislature nung araw, nung martial law na until lumabas yung batas ng pambansa. So the pork was in the hands of the executive. Sila nag-allocate nung gano'n. Purely sila. Kaya nga hindi ba may kasabihan nga na taxation without representation is tyranny. Kasi kung isang tao lang ang nag-allocate ng pork, tyrannical yan. Kasi walang tao nagre-represent. Now, if your representative is foolish enough to spend that pork pang sarili niya lang, and it's not the fault of the pork ng pork barrel yan, it's the fault of the person.
As legislators, our first principal task is to make laws and to make sure that the laws are implemented. We're not there to dole out government resources to our constituents. That's not our function.
All right, Congressman Albano? What can I say? Budgeting is lawmaking. We have the power of the purse. And again, I'll reiterate my stand. Taxation without representation, sabi nga ni Rudy Fariñas, is tyranny. Diyan nagka-revolusyon doon sa Amerika noong araw. Dahil sa ganyan ginawa ng king na tinataksan niya yung without any representation.
let's go to the heart of the matter. No? Pinoy's pronouncements. You said earlier in your statement that you don't agree with it.
Well, because in the first place, the president is not abolishing the pork barrel.
All right. So you want to make that clear?
Yes. What he said in his statement was that they will abolish the PIDAF,
yeah.
but they will come up with a new mechanism. So ganun pa rin yun. Tig 70 million pa rin si congressman, tig 200 million pa rin si senador, and the president has anywhere from 400 billion to as much as 1.2 trillion estimated
in discretionary
funds.
All right.
So we're not actually abolishing anything. The president just wants to, introduce a line itemized pork, which is basically the same thing, because as long as the discretion lies with the legislators and also with the executive, it is vulnerable to corruption, it is vulnerable to patronage politics.
So to you, when he said that it's time to abolish the PDAF, it's just abolishing the name, but it's the same animal.
Yes, yes.
All right. Congressman Suarez, your thoughts on that?
Rod, ganito yan, yung sistema na hindi kailangan ng legislator or an public elected official lang isang funds that you can come up with social assistance. That's good for developed nation. Doon walang pumupunta sa bahay ng congressman. Wala doon nanghihingi pag may namatayan, pag merong may sakit, they don't go there. Eh tayo dito, hindi gaya na sinabi ko, kalahati ng population is in poverty.
Right.
And as we are talking now, one person has a serious illness in my district.
And it's knocking on your door.
And for the last 18 years, I have life support systems using government funds that I have placed in the hospital. These are serious case of tuberculosis and kidney problem. Alam mo naman, napaka-mamahal ng sakit na ito. Saan namin kukunin yung pangtulong dito? Eh, ang posisyon ni Teddy, ilagay sa meaningful use ng you beef up Department of Health and come up with this solution. But let's be realistic about this. Not even the PDAP can answer to all of this. I can even say this is a band-aid solution, but something is being done.
But do you think, though, that the president was being upfront and being honest to the people when he said we'll abolish the PDAF, or was it just a way of appeasing the people? Don't go na to the rally. Well, I'm changing it. I'm listening to you.
Well, I will have to admit it's a very unpopular politically for the president because ang alay niya, remember, both Senate and House is now influenced by the administration. Mga tao niya, yan ang unang maapektuhan.
Yeah.
Pero sa akin lang, and I think Teddy, sabi ni Teddy, 5 years na siyang hindi natanggapan during the time of GMA. Nung may natanggap ka, Teddy, naglagay ka din siguro sa hospital. Pareho tayo eh. Halos pareho tayo. Kaya tayong pangalan natin, wala dito kay Janet na police, we applied it properly.
Right.
Ngayon, maaaring sabihin natin na may umabuso. Because right now, we're still guessing. Tama ba lahat itong mga allegations na ito? Kasi ngayon, katulad ng sinabi nila, may 3 billion si Y. Kurat. Wala naman pala. Paano ngayon yan? The damage there already. So, ang sa akin lang is this. You come up with more stringent measure to see that the public money is properly used, but you do not have the luxury of time to sit while bulk of your country is suffering.
Do you think that the president should maybe give leeway or allow some of that budget allotted to him to, let's say, to the national budget, to the other agencies?
Which brings me to that point, because it's inaccurate to say that the special purpose funds are just for the president. That's inaccurate, because whenever the president makes them available, he goes and then gives it to the department. Like, for example, if in case the DSWD says, in the recent case of what has happened in Zamboanga, everybody knows that we have to rebuild and rehabilitate everything that has been devastated in Zamboanga. So where does the president get that? The president gets that from the special purpose funds for those particular purposes. I understand it's a mix of coming from the savings, it's coming from the contingent fund. And the President spends it as the law says that where it should go. And also, it's not true that we don't know where the money goes because that's audited yearly by COA. Whatever fund is disbursed by the President outside of these funds, COA has the right and the duty to audit the agency that it goes to. For example, in cases where we make donations to other countries as tokens of solidarity whenever there is a calamity that happens, that's always disbursed properly and that's always audited.
Now, is this President? Yes, go ahead.
But I have a question because you mentioned COA. But we all know what's coming out now. COA only audited 2007 to 2009. So if you're talking about 2010 to 2013, COA has not really come out with a categorical report where the President spent the money from 2010 to 2013.
So actually, that's also inaccurate. That's also inaccurate because what the COA chairman explained is that they did a special audit of PDAF for 2007 to 2009. But the annual audit reports of the agencies have always been uploaded since 2010. And Chairman Pulido Tan was very clear. She had already instructed her auditors not to wait for a special audit for 2010 onwards. So all PDAF-funded projects that have been given to implementing agencies have already been audited since 2010.
May I just ask, I just want to ask her, because I never received my PDAF from the Pinoy administration for 3 years. May I know where you put my money or where you put the money of the district, of the first district of Zambales?
Can that be found? Can that be...
that can be traced eventually somewhere.
Because I have been asking Secretary Butch Abad time and again, because he keeps on saying that diniretso nyo sa district, and even Secretary Lacerda mentioned that on national TV. But whenever I ask for a list of where were the projects that you put the PDAF, the first district, you never furnished me a copy.
That's
why the question here really is transparency and accountability.
Correct. Now, okay, and that's our best of opposing views in 2013. Expect bolder and more engaging discussions on the most relevant issues of 2014. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Happy New Year and good night.